Hey everyone, this is Kandace and Sher with Processing Trauma Out Loud. Last week, Sher and I started a new topic coming out of the series that we did on shame. It's a little connected, but really our hope and our heart was after processing was to talk about what happens when we've peeled back those layers of shame and we're starting to remember who we are with a desire to reclaim those gifts, the glory of what it means to shine in your God created image. And so, Cher, we talked about your story more and the ways that you were cursed as a child and the vows that you made, and now what it's like for you coming up and out of that and reclaiming that sense of being that 20-year-old teacher, 22-year-old teacher who came alive when she was teaching children to move their bodies and to have fun in the activities that they were doing. So if you didn't listen to that, go back because it I think it was a fun episode. Um, I know that we got into some things that we were hoping made sense. So if it didn't, please reach out to us at CandaceShare@gmail.com because we just love having these discussions because here's the thing. Healing from trauma is freaking hard work. But I want to say there's light and there's more love to experience and there's more aliveness that can come. And it can come from no longer trying to hide, pretend, or to perform for approval or acceptance or to get love, but it comes in purity like, oh, this is who I am. And whether it's accepted or rejected is kind of irrelevant. It's just, I'm going to connect back to what I'm here for.
Yeah, which is what we're made for and what shame has tried to take out, right? Like shame tries to take us out in our areas of aliveness and gifting and glory because shame doesn't like that in the world. and
True.
and we can feel vulnerable. In our unhealed spaces, we can feel really vulnerable in these places where we feel most alive. And so sometimes as we age, we develop ways and patterns of protecting. And but then as we experience healing, it's like we have these aspects of our true self and our alive self that just burst forth. And sometimes we're even a little surprised by that. And it's like, okay, that's who I am and that's who I want to be more and more. And that's some of the goodness of this journey that is a lot of hard work, but it is such good work. Yeah. And today we're going to shift a little bit to one of your stories of a time when you were going through some difficult stuff. And you want to just bring us to that place, Candace?
Mhm. Yeah, this time that I'm thinking of, I was 16, 17 years old, but I even want to go back a little bit before that of being a child who would see things and know things, not perfectly, of course. I was a child. Um, what is that saying? Children are expert observers, but not very good interpreters, right?
Yeah.
I would say that I was an expert observer.
Mm.
And the thing about it is I would not just keep it to myself. I actually used my voice as a child
Yeah.
to no avail.
Mm.
And I'm not saying that means that children make all the decisions or whatever, but gosh, listen to children. Like that's what I want to say.
Mm.
And so anyway, I do have some younger stories, and this kind of makes me laugh now. I have a few stories where I had people call me a brat.
Oh.
Okay. And I can look back on that now and say, oh yeah, I'm sure in my foolishness, my childishness, I could be bratty, but I could also be called a brat because I was speaking truth.
Yeah.
I was calling things out
Yeah.
that didn't feel comfortable for the adults around me.
Yeah.
And so when I was 17, those of you who know my story, I was living in a home for unwed mothers, about ready to place my son for adoption. And I have all these letters that I wrote my dad, but the other day I found a letter that I wrote my mom. And in that letter, as a 17-year-old, I am talking to my mom about what it will be like when I return back home to my hometown. And I start processing with her in this letter 3 options that I have about where I can live and where the best place for me would be. And share as I'm reading this letter and actually remembering where I was at when I wrote it. It hit me like, oh my gosh, this is my glory, and this is where I've been shamed. This is my gifting to be able to help others process, see options, look at scenarios. And if you haven't read my memoir, I even have a landscape of scenarios when it comes to childhood trauma.
Mm.
And it was also where I became too much,
Mm.
right? I became too much. And it's where the shame came in of you don't know how to do this. It doesn't matter what you say. And I also have stories that I felt at times people would pull that out of me, right? They would come to me or ask me. The problem is when we're still living in the shame of it's going to come out sideways. It's not going to come out in the purest form. And so that has been a shit show for me. And I have to have some humor because I had such an intense desire, even as a 20-year-old,
Yeah.
to make things right in my world, my my family,
Yeah.
and I needed healing. I'll just say that.
Well, yeah, there's so much there, Candace. And I'm thinking about something that Patria said a couple of weeks ago on our episode when she said she loves the mountains because it is a place where she feels contained. That being in the mountains has this gives her this sense of containment that like nothing else. And my question for you is as that really alive and really kind of force of nature person that you are in all the wonderful ways too. But the ways that got you labeled brat or the ways that got you called in negative and named in negative ways, but actually that force of nature part of who you are, that problem solver, that courageous woman, that woman who would use her voice, like the people in your world couldn't contain you.
Mm-mm.
And I'm wondering, where have you found containment? What kind of spaces or places or people offer you containment where you feel like you can be fully alive as who you are and that you're in a space where that feels safe?
Mhm. So the first time somebody leaned in when I felt big, okay, I was feeling the bigness of my emotions, my thoughts, my perspective, my truth, right? The first time someone leaned in instead of away was my coach, Patria.
Yeah.
I had never experienced that before.
Wow.
At least not that I can remember. I'm not saying that I hadn't had people be kind to me or want to help me, but showing up in really this sense of shame, like for who I am, to have her lean in with her full attention and her gaze of love,
Mhm.
it was mind-blowing. Like the idea, tell me more, help me understand. I'm like,
Mm.
what?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was my first, but then I went into story group, I think about a year later. And then I had other women doing that, and
Mhm.
you being one of them.
Mm.
Um, I've shared this many times, and there's a reason why I keep sharing it because it was life changing and I'll never forget it. But there were times I felt so too much that I would literally cover my eyes
Yeah.
because I couldn't bear.
Yeah.
I'd go back to that girl
Yeah.
that no one could contain.
Yeah.
And so when I would uncover my eyes and everybody's leaning in and looking at me, I
Yeah.
was like, okay, I'm experiencing what I've heard my whole life, most of my life, that the kingdom of God is here and now.
Mm.
That's what comes up for me, Cher. Like if we carry the kingdom of God within us, and I do believe we do,
Mm.
I was experiencing it in a way that I never had before.
Yeah. Because not only were we hearing your story, not only were we seeing your shame, but we were saying, bring it. Like, bring the fullness of who you are. We want to see it. We want to see more. And I specifically, I'm remembering the experience you had of one in our group saying, and even if you mess it up in the worst ways possible, we are here for you. Like our arms are around you and outstretched to you. And I am feeling, Candace, like the wonder of that. And also I'm feeling like the sadness of how tragic it is that we are experiencing these things so late in our lives. I mean, glad that
Yes.
we're experiencing them, but that like your first memory of really sensing that you were in a contained, like in the full scope of who you are, someone could contain that and want more is when you were close to 50 years of age. Like, and I'm glad. And we want this for the young women in our lives, the girls and the women. Like, we want the world to be awakened to, like, we don't have to be afraid of people in their full glory. Like, yeah, that's another whole topic. But yeah, I love that so much, Candace, that you experienced and you now know, and you know what it means to be invited to come forward in your greatness, in your glory, in your passion, in your desire, right? All of these things that we've been talking about, like as the layers of shame are getting peeled off, and you are being invited forward, like,
Yeah.
yeah, I see the beauty and the glory. What are you feeling?
Mhm. Wow, I just had some memories pop up into my head of being in how much do I want to share about this? Being in meetings, and I'm not, please hear my heart here. It's not because even if there were women in there, it would be, there'd probably be complexity. But being in meetings with all males, okay, and several over a period of several years. And for the most part, most of the time, I couldn't be contained.
Yeah.
I was a threat.
Yeah.
I was upsetting the status quo. And I don't say that in pride. I don't say that saying I see perfectly or I know everything. But what I did see and what I did know and what I did speak could not be contained.
Yeah.
I was a threat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how do I feel about that right now? Would
Mm.
I have done something differently? Maybe. I still had a lot of healing. But here's the thing, for people that had gone through their own work in their own healing, they could have contained me even if I did it wrong.
Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
that make sense, Cher?
Yes, and I want to say, like, you were a threat to a system that was dysfunctional. You were a threat to an establishment or an institution, and so in their attempts to manage the system, they had to silence you. They had to squeeze you into a box that was far too small for you. And what I'll say is, you didn't fit there. Like you were there and it's what you knew. You were reenacting, so you were in this kind of a place and in this kind of a space, but that kind of a place and space was never right for you because you were alive. You were
I've
in
never
your
looked at that as I've never looked at that as a reenactment, but it absolutely was a reenactment.
yeah.
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 Yeah. And
Reenactment.
so
Yeah. And we talked about reenactments last in the previous episode, so go back to that and hear about that if you haven't. But yeah, go ahead, Candace.
well, so just being in a space where I had the opportunity, I showed up, you know, feeling too much, having a lot of truth, speaking it, and to just like it's not that I needed people to agree with me, right? I just needed them not to reject me or
Engage.
to what?
You needed people to engage,
Yes.
to say, "Hey, I hear you. I'm not sure I agree with you, but tell me more. What are you seeing? What are you talking about here? This doesn't feel true." Or, I'm intrigued, right? But instead, it was this perception that you were threatening the system.
Mhm. Yeah, so there's no curiosity, right? And that's the difference. Like people kind of don't understand why curiosity is the doorway.
Yeah,
Because if I don't have curiosity, I'm assuming that I know everything.
yeah,
I'm assuming that my perspective is the only perspective. And so curiosity doesn't mean that you have to go against your own values or, but it does mean I love what Sandra says, that she's in our Pearls group. There are people who are intent on misunderstanding you.
Mm, wow.
And there are people who are very intent on trying to understand.
Yeah,
Share, you and I have chosen to make our closest communities on people who truly seek understanding.
yeah. Right. I have no interest anymore in surrounding myself with those who are stuck in systems of shame. We'll come back to that are stuck in systems of shame that require controlling and managing people in ways contrary to calling people up into their expansiveness.
I want to say shame and pride. Now,
Mm,
I do believe that underneath pride, there is shame, but it is this, pride does not allow us to be curious about somebody else's story, somebody else's perspective. And, you know, and so, you know, pride is something that it can be hard to unravel because if you grew up in a home that you couldn't be wrong, because if you were wrong, there would be harsh punishment. So I even have compassion on people that are stuck in pride,
yeah,
but we see it,
yeah.
right?
And it's
Pride is not curious.
no. And pride is hurtful and harmful and causes people to remain stuck in their under curses and agreements and vows and causes people to not be allowed to be fully alive. And so it's yes, it is just
Yeah.
and unfortunately, it's a big part of most institutions, organizations that have some level of dysfunction operating to keep people small so that they can stay big.
Yeah. Well, this was really helpful for me, Cher. I feel like I have some things to process.
Yeah.
as I'm considering that reenactment, not really to go back so much there, but to notice for today,
Yeah.
like, what else am I going to be drawn in to reenact, and how can I notice that, and how can I choose differently?
Mm.
But yeah, and just I want to say you have been one of those people that, we've had to work things out at times,
Mhm.
but this idea that I don't have to think, oh, I'm too much for share.
Yeah.
You're one of those people. Tell me more.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. And I love this. We've talked many times about how we're on the opposite end of the spectrum in many ways. And yet instead of it causing us to move toward self-protection, it has invited us into curiosity about ourselves and discovery because we have so much love in this place and in this space. Oh, okay. Candace popped off here. I think we've had a little bit of a glitchy system. So I'm going to go ahead and close out the episode. And yeah, such a great conversation with Candace about what it means to begin to expand and become more and more fully alive. So thanks for being with us today. And Candace, I know you'll see this. I love you so much, friend.